Good evening. Welcome to our FAFSA evening tonight. This is the last night of our College 101 series. Tonight, we're going to be learning all about this very important form, the FAFSA, and help you navigate through it step by step. Now, before we get started, I want you to know this event would not be possible without the help of our partners, the partners that you see on the screen here. They work really hard behind the scenes to make this event possible for you. And yes, we are live. So if you have questions during tonight's session, you are welcome to drop them in the Q&A box, and one of our experts will connect with you. We have a whole team of experts in the background waiting for your questions and waiting to connect with you one-on-one. And if you wish to enable your live closed captioning, you can click the closed captioning subtitles button at the bottom right corner of your video player, and you'll be able to see that as well. So now, to get us started, I am going to pass it on to Dr. Mansell, who will be helping us get started.
I'm trying to get my camera going. One moment. There we go. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Karima Campbell Mansell. I am an associate director in the Office of Student Financial Assistance at the University at Central Florida. And it is my pleasure tonight to speak with you on behalf of the Florida Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. And our president could not be here tonight, but I will give you a little bit of information about the association and we'll go from there. So the Florida Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, our president is Miss Nadine Bailey, and I'd like to welcome you to our College 101 series. The Florida Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, FAFSA for short, is a nonprofit organization whose membership is made up of financial aid professionals, business partners, and others who provide support who are located throughout the state of Florida. So it is our pleasure tonight to provide this session, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Give me one moment and I will share my screen. Just taking a little time. I think I might have a slow connection tonight. All right. So I want to go ahead and jump right in, and I want to make sure that I share what exactly we're going to be doing tonight and how we are going to go through the FAFSA. What we will be doing is looking at an overview of the 2023-24 FAFSA. We're going to go through the various sections of the FAFSA so that when you are completing the FAFSA, you're aware of the information that you'll be inputting as you go through this process. We are taking your questions throughout the duration of this presentation. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section, and then members of the financial aid community will respond to those questions on the spot. And so let's get started with this is actually the 23-24 FAFSA. And so when you log in, you're going to see on studentaid.gov where you log in to complete your FAFSA. So when you log in to complete your FAFSA, you're going to use your student aid login as your FSA ID to log in and sign in and access your financial aid account. So if you do not have an FSA ID, both for our students and our parents, you want to make sure that you do get a federal student aid ID so that you can complete the FAFSA and sign it electronically. Once you log in, you're going to select the Apply for Aid section, and then you're going to be able to start your FAFSA. And then you're going to indicate who you are. So are you the parent, are you the student, or are you a preparer who is completing the FAFSA form? From there, you're going to log in using your FSA ID again, and then be able to access the form. When you're accessing the form, you're going to indicate some demographic information in order to continue through the process. That includes your name, your first and last name, your date of birth, and your social security number. When you log in using, again, your FSA ID, your email, or the mobile number associated with your FSA ID and your password, then you're going to be taken to the FAFSA page. Whereas a dependent student, which the vast majority of our graduating high school seniors are going to be considered dependent students for financial aid purposes. Those students are going to go ahead and log in and start to complete the FAFSA, which will include their demographic information, their financial information, and parental data. So we're going to go through the various sections in this particular section of the FAFSA. So when the FAFSA is being completed, again, the Social Security number is an incredibly key component of completing the FAFSA. Students who are completing the FAFSA must have a valid Social Security number. So you're going to go ahead and put that information in, your legal name, as well as your date of birth. And in this section, we are asking specifically for student information. So it's really important to look at the section and whose information is being requested. And then the student will input the student's email address and telephone number, as well as the student's address, their permanent mailing address, and then the state in which the student has residency. And that there is also a question that must be answered, and that is the citizenship question. So students must answer that they are either a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen in order to complete the FAFSA and be considered for financial aid eligibility. From there, there's going to be specific questions about when residency was established in the given state. And so it's going to ask for the state, are you a legal resident, and the time frame in which you became a legal resident. And again, that's nationality question, the U.S. citizenship question is there as well. Additionally, it's going to ask some questions about the 23-24 year and refer to when the high school diploma will be completed and when the what level the student will be working on during the 23-24 year. What I would like to emphasize is the level that the student will be working on for the vast majority of our students is going to be either a bachelor's degree, a vocational degree, or an associate's degree. It's really important that the student indicates the right program. We do sometimes have students who are graduating from high school who indicate that they are going to be working in a graduate program or being a graduate student. Graduate students are pursuing degrees higher, master's level or higher. And then it's going to ask if the student will have their first bachelor's degree before the 23-24 year. In that instance, the answer is no for the vast majority of our students. And then indicate the grade level in which the student will be starting in the 23-24 year. And in many cases, that student will be a first time in college student. And then if you're interested in federal work study, you're going to indicate that on the FAFSA as well. Federal work study is a student employment program that allows students to earn a portion of their financial aid package by earning a biweekly paycheck. If you are interested in being considered for federal work study, you want to indicate that on the FAFSA. The school that you're interested in attending will get that information and can potentially award you federal work study based on the way that you answer this question on the FAFSA. This section is going to also include the student's driver's license information or their state issued ID. So you want to provide that information on the FAFSA as well. And then there's some information as to whether or not the student was ever in foster care, as well as the highest level of education that each parent 1 and parent 2 has received if there are 2 parents that are being included on the FAFSA. Also, there's going to be some information on whether the student has ever been eligible for aid or received aid before, and adding the information about the student's high school. So information on where the student will be graduating, and that information is essential to the completion of the FAFSA application. So we're still looking at the demographic section, but we're about to move into the school section as well, where the student is indicating their high school section. If you don't see your high school when you type it in, you can do a search and then select the right high school associated with your graduation, and then you're going to confirm that that's the high school that you're attending and continue. And then you're also going to include in this section the colleges, up to 10 colleges that you would like to receive the results of your FAFSA information. If you don't know the college's federal code, that is fine. You can do a search using the state and the city. The city is not required, and the school name. And by doing that, you're able to search those schools, add the schools to your FAFSA, and those schools will then get the FAFSA's results so that they can then determine your eligibility for financial aid. And here you see when you do the search, it pulls up a variety of different schools, and then you can select those schools you would like to include. Again, you can select up to 10 schools. To add more schools, you just select the Add More Schools tool here in this section. The FAFSA does also ask a student marital status question. And I always like to emphasize this because it is speaking to the marital status of the student. And it's speaking to the marital status of the student on the day that the FAFSA is being filed. In that situation, you're going to make sure that you select the student's marital status in this section. If the student is single, the student will indicate single here and continue. If the student has a different marital status, they can indicate that in this section. From there, we're going to launch into the questions about a student's dependency. And so here, the question will be pertaining to the 23-24 year, so July 23 through June 24. And that question is going to ask, does that student have children for whom the student will provide half of the child's support between July 1st of 2023 through June 30th of 2024? The next question will ask, does the student have any other dependents other than a child or a spouse who lives with the person for whom the student will provide support through June 30th of 2024? And then if that is the case, there's going to be some additional if that is not the case, there will be some additional dependency questions. And those additional dependency questions will speak to whether the student is either active duty military or a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. If at any time after the student turned 13, if the student had a situation where both parents were deceased, or the student was in foster care, or was a dependent or ward of the court, or if the student was determined to be an emancipated minor or in a legal guardianship. If any of those questions and the previous questions pertaining to marital status and dependency, or dependence, I should say, if any of those questions, if the answer to any of those questions is yes, then the student would be considered independent for financial aid purposes and would not need to complete the next section, which is going to be parental demographics and parental financials. However, the vast majority of our students who are coming from high school directly to college do fall into the category of a dependent student for financial aid purposes. Dependency is specifically based on these questions outlined on the FAFSA and does not have to do with the student's ability to provide financial support to his or herself. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that the dependency status is going to be based on these questions outlined on the FAFSA. So if a student answers no to all of these questions, then they're going to be directed to complete the parental section of the FAFSA. Additionally, there is a question that is going to speak to a student and their risk for homelessness or their homelessness status. And that is going to be, it's on or after July 1st of 2021 for the current year's FAFSA. Was the student homeless or were they self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? And if that is the case, that is another question that may qualify the student for independent status. Again, if all of those answers are no, then the student will move forward with providing parental information. If by chance a student is unable to provide parental information, if a parent has refused to complete the FAFSA and is unwilling to provide that information, and that parent provides absolutely no financial support for that student, there are cases where a student may submit the FAFSA without parental information and do a process at the school that they plan to attend to potentially get only the unsubsidized portion of the federally funded student loans. Unsubsidized loans do accrue interest once they disperse. So this is a resort that students should utilize only if they are unable to get parental information, the parent has refused to provide information, and the parent provides absolutely no financial support. That is a special circumstance that can be considered. However, in the vast majority of cases, what will happen is a dependent student will move forward with providing information about the student's parents. So, whose information should you provide? If your parents live together, whether they are married or unmarried, you'll be providing the information for both parents. If parents are separated or divorced, you'll provide the information for the parent with whom the student lived with the most, or the custodial parent. If parents are separated and divorced and you live with both parents equally, 50% custody, then you will provide the information for the parent who provides the most financial support. And if a student is legally adopted, they will provide the information of the adoptive parents. One thing I do want to mention is parents who are remarried, step-parent financial information is also provided on the FAFSA. So here it's going to ask the marital status for parents. So this is specific to the parent's marital status at the time the FAFSA is being filed, and then it will ask for date of that particular marital status if that marital status is married or remarried. Here we're going to get information about the parent, and we're going to ask for parent social security number, parent last name, first initial, as well as the parent's date of birth and email address. I do want to emphasize, while students must have a valid social security number in order to complete the FAFSA, parents do not necessarily need a valid social security number. So a parent does not have to be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen to provide their information on the FAFSA. While the student does, the parent does not. If a parent is not a resident of the United States and does not have a valid social security number, that parent can't enter all zeros in lieu of a social security number and continue with the FAFSA filing. And then this is the information for the other parent if the parents do reside together. So that is parent number 2, and that could potentially be a step parent if a parent is remarried, if the custodial parent is remarried. And then it's going to ask for the parent's legal state of residence. So similarly to the information we provided in the student section. And then here it's going to ask the same types of questions or some similar questions about dependents. And it's going to ask how many dependents, specifically dependent children, did the parents have that the parents provided more than half of their support. And that is going to be between July 23 and June 24. And then that information will be provided there. And then if there are other dependents that may not be children, then that information would be provided in this section as well from July 1st of 2023 through June 30th of 2024. Additionally, it's going to ask for the number of students in college. So it's going to ask, out of the individuals in the household, how many are going to be in college between July 1st of 2023 and June 30th of 2024. However, the parents are not included, and neither is the parents are not included. However, you do want to include the student for whom the FAFSA is being completed. So if there's that student and other individuals such as siblings who are attending college, you want to make sure that that information is included. However, parents are not included in this section. And then there's information on the parent's tax filing status. And this is going to be for 2021. Has the parent completed their tax return? If they have, it's going to ask for the type of return the parent completed. And then it's going to ask the filing status for 2021. And based on that information, If possible, we will encourage you to utilize the IRS data retrieval tool. If you're eligible to use the IRS data retrieval tool, it will populate and there will be a little blue box at the bottom that asks you if you would like to proceed to the IRS. Otherwise, you would enter this information manually. We strongly suggest that you utilize the IRS data retrieval tool. It is a tool that is utilized to assist with simplifying the FAFSA process. It will bring in your information directly from your 2021 taxes. It's going to come in masked and unable to be edited. That's to have an added layer of security, but it does help with ensuring that the right information is inputted on the FAFSA. And then once you could do that, as you can see here, you're going to proceed to the IRS. If you choose to use the data retrieval tool, again, highly recommended. And then from there, you're going to indicate who is logging in to access the IRS information, utilizing the FSA ID and FSA password. And then from there, the information will come in. If you select to not utilize the data retrieval tool, then you'll have to manually input the financial information. That will include the adjusted gross income for 2021, as well as wages earned in 2021 for both parent 1 and parent 2, if 2 parents are being utilized on the FAFSA, as well as the income tax paid in that particular year. And then additional questions pertaining to that tax filing year. And so questions about combat pay, questions about student grants and scholarships reported on the taxes, the education credits reported on the taxes, if there were any untaxed portions of IRA distributions, any IRA deductions, and any tax-exempt interest income. All of that information is included on the FAFSA. Again, if you use the data retrieval tool, this information is going to come in from the IRS and you won't have to manually input it. Some additional financial information that you would also include on the FAFSA is any child support paid because of divorce or separation as a result of a legal requirement in the year of 2021. Any earnings under a cooperative education program by a college in 2021, and any taxable earnings from need-based employment, such as the federal work-study program in 2021, would all be included here. And this is specifically asking about the parents. So then after the parental financial information has been inputted, the next section will be student financial information. Here, students are going to indicate whether or not they were required to file taxes in 2021. For many students, if they did not have income in that given year, they are not going to be required to file taxes in 2021, or if they may be below the IRS threshold for that year, they may not be required to file taxes. That is a response, and it is a valid response that can be inputted on the FAFSA. However, if the student did file 2021 taxes, it's going to ask what type of form they were able to use and their filing status. And similarly to our parents, students can also use the IRS data retrieval tool and go ahead and import that information directly into the FAFSA if they are tax filers. If the student is not a tax filer or selects to input the information manually, they're going to input very similar information to the parents. So they're going to indicate their information in regard to their adjusted gross income for 2021. And this section would, excuse me, also be information that our independent students would input on the FAFSA. I apologize, excuse me. The student is also going to indicate the income earned from work in 2021. And if the student is married, they would input their spouse's information. Additionally, what did the student pay in taxes for 2021? And then those same questions that we talked about, I apologize, for parents. If there was any combat pay, any college or grant scholarships reported on the IRS form, any educational credits, as well as the untaxed portion of the IRA, I apologize, and IRA deductions and payments and tax-exempt interest. That being said, similar information I apologize, to the parent section, where we would then request, did the student pay any child support? Did the student have any earnings from a cooperative education program? And did the student have any taxable earnings from work study or another need-based employment program? And then the untaxed portion will be similar to the parent's untaxed portion. And this is untaxed income. So this is child support received, anything paid on behalf of the student or the family, payments in a tax-deferred pension plan, veterans non-education benefits such as disability death pension, any other untaxed income that's not reported, such as workers' comp or certain disability benefits, and any monies received or paid on behalf of the student. All that information would be indicated there. And then there's a section that's going to ask about assets. This information is also going to be provided for parents. So we do ask for both parental and student assets, indicating the amount of in the student's bank account at the time, as well as the net worth of investments, including real estate, but not the home in which the student or family resides. And as of today, what is the net worth of current businesses and or farms? Here we are. We have gotten to the point where we've gone through all of the various sections of the FAFSA. If you are a preparer, meaning that you are someone who has been paid to complete the FAFSA on behalf of the family, that would be indicated here. For the vast majority of you on today's webinar, you are not a preparer, you are either the student or the parent. And so you would indicate no and continue to the summary of the FAFSA and submitting the FAFSA. And here you're going to go through the various sections of the FAFSA, and I'm not going to go through each and every one of these because you'll just go through and check to make sure that the information provided looks correct. And then from there, you're going to read and agree to the terms of submitting the FAFSA, including the accuracy and the accuracy of the information of your tax information. And then you can either sign your FAFSA electronically, strongly encouraged, using your FSA ID, both for the student and the parent. You can use your FSA ID to sign it. There is another option where you can print and submit a signature page, but again, the most expeditious way and efficient way to sign your FAFSA is using your FSA ID. And then you will also have an FSA ID for parents to complete the FAFSA. Just want to indicate that students and parents do need their own FSA ID. I want to reiterate that. I know I said that at the beginning. If you are a parent and you've never done the FAFSA before, and if you're a student and you've never done the FAFSA before, you do need to apply for your FSA ID. You can do so on studentaid.gov. That is going to serve as your way of being able to access all things federal financial aid. And you're going to have that FSA ID. It's going to stay with you throughout your duration of interacting with federal student aid. And again, this is the section where the student is affirming, or the parent is affirming in this section, that the information is correct and complete, and that the forms that they have filed are their tax information is indicated as well. Here, the parent will enter their FSA ID and their FSA ID password, and that will serve as the signature. When you have completed the FAFSA, you are going to get a confirmation page that lets you know that you have successfully completed the FAFSA. And from there, you would also get information on the schools that you've indicated on the FAFSA. You're going to get that school's graduation rate, their retention rate, and their transfer rate. So this is information about student success at that particular institution. So a few other things, you can log into FAFSA and you can do quite a few things. You can start your FAFSA form, you can start a renewal. And so in order to do that, you would go to studentaid.gov, and then you're going to indicate whether you're starting the 23-24 FAFSA and or if you need to start over or continue. So you can always save the FAFSA along the way. So let's say you started and you find that you're getting sidetracked and you need to stop where you are and revisit it. You can always log back in and pick up the 23-24 FAFSA and then determine whether or not you want to start over and start from scratch, or if you can continue where you left off. If there are actions required, you are going to get information from student aid that lets you know that your application has not been processed and that you will need to take the following steps. So that is a really important key component. If you do not get that confirmation page, you want to realize that something has not gone through and you need to figure out what those next steps are. Federal student aid is really great at saying in plain English exactly what it is you need to do in order to continue the financial aid process and get your FAFSA filed. So here in this particular example, it says that the SNN on the FAFSA from the parent section is incorrect. Please make that correction. And so if there's something that needs to be corrected, it's going to tell you what that is. And you can make those corrections by going to the Make the Correction section on studentaid.gov. As I mentioned before, if your FAFSA has been filed correctly, you're going to get confirmation. It's going to tell you congratulations and your next steps. The FAFSA information has then, once it's processed, it is sent to the schools that you have listed on the FAFSA. And then the schools will use that information to determine the student's FAFSA eligibility. And then if there's anything needed to continue the processing of your aid, you will see that with the school. The school is going to tell you what you need to do. And then if you have any questions, you can contact the school directly. So the schools get a report of the information provided on the FAFSA, but when you complete the FAFSA as a student, you also get some output, and that output is called the Student Aid Report, or the SAR, as we call it in financial aid. When you get your SAR, you're able to either edit the FAFSA form if you see incorrect information or view the SAR report. So these are some of the things that you can do. When you view your SAR report, it's going to share with you your expected family contribution, or your EFC. The expected family contribution is going to be the number that the federal processor or federal student aid determines based on the information provided on the FAFSA. Your expected family contribution is going to measure your family's financial strength based on that information and determine the type of aid for which you qualify. The lowest expected family contribution is a 0 EFC. Students with a 0 EFC will qualify for the Pell Grant and could potentially qualify for other types of gift aid or grants as a result of the need. However, as the EFC goes up, the type of financial aid for which a student qualifies can change and shift. And so this is the information that you see on the student aid report, and I'm not going to go through each section, but then once you have completed all of the FAFSA and you're actually looking at your student aid report, it's going to show you, again, the school information that it was sent to. It's also going to tell you a little bit of information about your financial aid history and the type of aid that you have borrowed in the past. And then you can always view it. If you find something incorrect, that's where you can make a correction. And then also in this section, you can view your correction history. So if anything has changed and you made a correction, you can see where those corrections have been made. So while we talk about corrections, I want to share with you how you would make a correction to your FAFSA. There are times when you view your FAFSA information or your SAR report and you find something is not quite right here. I didn't enter that correctly and I want to change that. The other thing you can do in this section is add additional schools to your FAFSA. So if you've already added 10 schools and there are 2 more schools that you're interested in getting that information, after those schools have gotten your FAFSA results, you can go back in and take off 2 schools and add an additional 2 schools so that those schools get the information. So you can add up to 10 at a time, but once that information has been sent to the school, you can update it and add additional if needed. Here, when you're making a correction, you can edit the FAFSA form. And if you need to edit the FAFSA form, you do create a save key to enter there. And here you're going to go to the different section that you would like to edit. And then add the correct information there. So you can enter the student demographic, the school selection section, the dependency section, the parental section for both demographics and financials, or student financials for our dependent student. And then once you do that, you're going to sign and submit again, and then you will get confirmation that the correction has been made. So a few additional resources available on studentaid.gov, and that is the various documents that a student has completed. A student can see all of those documents there. So once a student starts attending a college or university, there are a variety of different things that the student may be doing as a part of their financial aid history. In the My Documents section of studentaid.gov, once a student is logged in, they're able to see any documents that they have completed, including their loan counseling if they're a borrower, and their master promissory note if they are a borrower. They can also see notifications that you're getting from federal student aid. So if there's anything that federal student aid is trying to communicate to a student, the student will find this in the notification section of the of studentaid.gov when they're logged in. That's the end of the presentation portion of tonight's presentation, but I do want to stop my share and open up the floor for any questions that students or families may have.
Dr. Mansell, thank you. I will help if I can.
Thank you
we
so
have
much.
a lot of questions coming
All right,
in.
let's go.
A lot of it, Dr. Mansell, is really reiterating. And so I've tried to compile some of the ones that are repeating in the chat. I know you covered first signature or authentication. Can you walk us through the process of the FSA ID? We have a lot of questions about, do I apply online? Who needs to get it? How long does it take to get something back once I apply? How does that work?
Absolutely. So the Federal Student Aid ID, both the student and the parent need a Federal Student Aid ID. The FSA ID serves as your personally identifiable way of accessing all things federal student aid. And so what I would say is that parents and students can create a Federal Student Aid ID on studentaid.gov. And so if you haven't done that in the past, you want to go ahead and get that done as soon as possible. Some of the things I didn't mention about the FAFSA, because this is a slightly different presentation than we did the last time. The FAFSA launches every year on October 1st. So it did become available for the 23-24 year on October 1st of this year. And so all of our students and families who have seniors currently can go ahead and get the FAFSA done. So you do want to go ahead and get that FSA ID if you haven't already done so on studentaid.gov. When you go to studentaid.gov and you're on the Federal Student Aid website, there is there actually navigates you right there to do your Federal Student Aid ID on studentaid.gov.
You read my mind, because that was one of the questions we had repeated as well, is the timing. The 23-24 FAFSA period covers that, but then if somebody has a student that's taking summer classes, do they need potentially another app?
I love that question. So yes, if a student is attending in the summer, it is very, very likely that that student will need to do the current FAFSA, which is the 22-23 FAFSA. For many schools, summer is what we call in higher education a trailer. So it's the end of the year. So the fall and spring start the aid year, and then the summer ends it. So if a student is starting in a summer term, and I know it's true for UCF and a lot of our other state universities and a lot of our state colleges, that the summer is a part of the year that is ending. So if a student is starting in that given summer, they want to go ahead and get the FAFSA done for the 22-23 year as well. I will also emphasize that that FAFSA closes on June 30th of 2023. So there is a limited window if you're starting in the summer to get that FAFSA done. So there's no harm, no foul in getting that FAFSA done along with the 23-24 FAFSA.
I am so happy you said that because that gives us the answer to the next question that was repeated in terms of deadline. And so there were a few questions about, is there a deadline for submitting the FAFSA for students starting in fall 2023?
So yes, and I'm going to tier that question. There is a deadline, a hard deadline with the Federal Department of Education. That the FAFSA opens on October 1st. So for example, the FAFSA for 23-24, it sounds so far away, but it really isn't. The FAFSA for 23-24 opens on October 1st of 2022, and it closes on June 30th of 2024. So that FAFSA window is in that time frame. However, sometimes schools, a lot of schools, have established what they call a priority filing date. And that priority filing date is the date that the school has established that the school would like to receive the results of that student's FAFSA to give the student what we call in financial aid maximum consideration. And so maximum consideration for financial aid is a way that we can equitably distribute limited resources. And so you want to know your school's priority filing date and ensure that you file your FAFSA by that school's priority filing date, not just in your student's senior year of high school, but every year thereafter. The FAFSA is an annual application, so it does require that students and families complete it each year that the student is enrolled in college.
Okay, good. I'm taking notes on this timeline to make sure. So good to know where they're sending that to. We had a couple of questions about whether or not it was absolutely required to complete the FAFSA, and so I'll read you a couple of those questions, and you can share your wisdom there. If the student is strictly looking at merit scholarships for certain universities, do they need to complete the FAFSA? And if education's already paid for and the student's not seeking financial aid, do they have to complete this form?
So the FAFSA is not necessarily a requirement. However, if a student is seeking merit-based financial aid at a specific institution, it really depends on the school. Some schools will require a FAFSA for that consideration. Some schools may have another application process for consideration. So it really does depend on the school when it comes to whether or not the FAFSA is required for merit-based aid. The other piece is, while the FAFSA is not required, it is highly recommended, even for students who have their financial resources all planned out for college. I have seen things change in family situations and change quickly, and they need to pivot and do something differently. It might be that the student may have to take out a federally funded student loan because the FAFSA is required for all federal aid to include federally funded student loans. Loans are only given to students who take action to receive the loans. So there's no harm or foul in completing a FAFSA. If your student is only eligible for federal loans, they will only get them if they request that the school processes them. However, completing the FAFSA and determining the type of eligibility that the student has, or having a FAFSA on file just in case it may be needed in the future, is a good plan. So that's my 2 cents there.
No, I love that. And so for those students that have been following the series, it sounds like in addition to what's required for admissions for where you're going, you need to do some research around what the requirements are around financial aid for that
Right.
particular school and track that to follow those steps.
And when we did the
As
last
well.
session, we talked about really knowing what happens at your school, because different schools have different processes and different timelines. So it's really important to learn what's happening at the schools you're interested in attending.
Absolutely. And I'll do a plug here. Those of you that missed the previous sessions, after tonight's sessions, we'll have the recordings for all of the series available on floridashines.org. We'll share that with you at the end as well. So you'll be able to watch those recordings, rewatch them, and rewatch them as needed. Dr. Mansell, there's a couple of questions about requirements for students that if they don't have a social security number, it's in process. Can the parent use theirs? Is that a deal breaker for filling out the application?
It actually is. One of the requirements for the FAFSA is that the financial aid applicant, or the recipient, is essentially the person who's applying to receive financial aid, must have a valid Social Security number. And that valid Social Security number, it is cross-referenced against the Social Security Administration. So when the FAFSA is completed, that is one of what we refer to in financial aid as the database checks. So that's one of the checks that happens at the federal level before if the Social Security number for the student cannot be confirmed, we will not get the FAFSA information in the offices of student financial aid.
Okay. Always good information to know before you get started with the form. The other set of questions that were repeated in the chat were related to work study. Can you go over again what work study is? And one of the particular
Absolutely.
questions, if you don't mind, talked about, is there a negative consequence if a student has a part-time job or a job and perhaps says, no, they're not interested in work study? Is there an effect if they answer a question one way or another?
So work study is a program available to students to assist with their educational funding. It is a part of the student's financial aid package. However, students are responsible for finding employment at their institution. Each school has their own process for that. So if a student is a work study student, they want to find out how they find work study jobs at their school. It is a wonderful experience in many ways because it's, for many students, their first experience with a professional working environment. It is also an opportunity to, start that job search process. So it is a work experience in that sense. However, not all students will qualify to receive work study, and work study is a limited resource. Schools don't have an indefinite pot of work study. So by answering on the FAFSA that you're interested in work study, what that tells the school is that you would like to be considered for that particular award. It does not commit you to a work study position. So I wanted to clarify that. So if a student has even remote interest and would like to be considered, they should indicate it on the FAFSA. However, most schools also have a process, as long as they still have funding available, where the student could, after completing the FAFSA, visit maybe the school's office, or maybe they have something that you can do online. Every school is different, so you want to know what happens at that particular institution that your student is attending, where they can say, is it possible for me to be reviewed for work study at this point? And so while answering on the FAFSA gives you that initial consideration, there might be an opportunity for secondary consideration later. So I wanted to add, if something changes and the student would like to be considered, they would want to find out how that works at their particular school by reaching out to the financial aid office.
Okay, yeah, always good to know that if there's any questions or they want to know specifics at that school, they can certainly reach out to the financial aid at that school. They have that resource there, and that there's room to make changes and edits and reconsideration.
Absolutely.
Great. The other set of questions, and it's a lot of terms, and they make me nervous, but perhaps there's a guide or somewhere that you might direct us to, things like parent assets, mortgages, properties, retirement. We saw retirements, thrift saving accounts, college saving plans, what's included, what's not. Does the FAFSA walk you through each, or is there a guide where you can figure out what to report and what not to report?
So some of the questions on the FAFSA actually provide more information on what exactly you should report there. A lot of the questions that pertain to tax items are going to correlate directly to the item or the line item on the tax returns. So those are correlated to the tax returns, but a lot of the financial questions also provide a bit more information as to what should be included in that particular question. So I hope that provides some clarity. And federal student aid on studentaid.gov also has certain terminology available on that website where students and families can learn a little bit more. Maybe not as detailed as some of the questions that are asked on the FAFSA, but some of the general terminology that we utilize in financial aid.
I am learning some of these terms myself here.
There's a
with
lot of
these
lingo,
questions.
and we recognize that. So I try when I'm speaking to break down, acronyms and the lingo that we utilize, because we do use a lot of lingo in financial aid.
Yeah. Well, and speaking, I think part of what makes the FAFSA perhaps sometimes easier is that IRS tool you talked about. There
Absolutely.
were a couple of questions about that here. Does it always work? Is it a bad thing if it doesn't work for us? And if we need to make corrections to what the IRS pulled in for us?
Okay, so a couple of things. If you utilize the data retrieval tool, you are not able to make corrections to the IRS data. By utilizing the data retrieval tool, that information is going to come in masked and it's not going to be able to be modified. So that information is going to come in directly from the IRS. So there won't be any modifications there. So that would be one of the things that say. In regards to can everyone use it? In most cases, students and families can use it, but there are some circumstances where that wouldn't work. One that comes to mind is if you are married and you file separately, because then you need to input the tax information from each tax return, and that wouldn't come in through the IRS data retrieval tool. So that's why the IRS data retrieval tool asks those three questions: the type of tax form that you file, as well as your filing status, because those things can impact whether or not the data retrieval tool can be utilized.
Great. And then related to that, and I think you just mentioned the ability to make corrections, but if things change mid-year, a parent loses their job, income changes,
Great question.
what happens? How do they update that?
Sure. So the FAFSA is going to use the base year. So we're talking about the 23-24 FAFSA. We're using base year 2021. You're always going to input that information on the FAFSA. So I just want to make that very clear. So even if things are drastically different than it was during the 2021 year, you're still going to use that as the base year. Each school has the authority to exercise what we call in financial aid professional judgment for special circumstances. So if things have drastically changed for a family, then that family wants to find out the professional judgment process or the special circumstance process at the school that the student is attending. And then that school can take the appropriate steps to modify certain elements of the information they've received from the FAFSA. So they could then go in and update maybe income information if there's been a change in the family's income. So that would be the course of action. You still complete the FAFSA with the correct base year and then find out about your school's special circumstance process or professional judgment process. It is a process that requires documentation. So then you would provide the school with the documentation. The school could then consider the new situation.
I will stop here to highlight one of our comments from parents saying that this has been very helpful and we're really appreciative of all your knowledge. So we're glad it's helpful for the parents as well.
My
We have
pleasure.
a question in all caps. So and this is actually one of the questions that repeated itself. And it goes a little beyond the form. But once they send the FAFSA, you talked about getting their SAR, their report, a copy of that, and the schools that they listed are going to get a report of that. When what can the student expect next? When does
Great
the
question.
package come in, the offer? How does that typically work?
It does vary by school, and different schools have different processes. What I will say is the vast majority of schools, by February the February of the leading into the fall, schools start to get that information going. So it depends on the school and the school's timeline. So anywhere between February and April, typically, students will start to get financial aid, what we refer to as financial aid packages or financial aid summaries. Those financial aid summaries are going to include the type of aid that particular school thinks you will qualify for at that institution. It's going to take into account the information provided on the FAFSA, the resources that that school has available to them. So your federal aid would be included, as well as if you're getting any institutional aid at that particular institution. And depending on how that school creates their financial aid packages or their financial aid summaries, there might be your state aid may be included as well, your estimate for Bright Futures, even if you haven't been deemed eligible just yet. I know at UCF we project eligibility until we get more information from the Florida Department of Education based on the students' incoming high school credentials. It is an estimate. So I do like to say that about that initial financial aid package that a student receives. It is an estimate. It takes into account assumptions. It is being utilized as a tool to help the student render decisions and plan for their finances for the upcoming year. When students get their financial aid notifications or financial aid summaries, they should take that information and look at the cost of attendance, which is the budget allotted to that student at the given institution, and look at the financial aid package that they're receiving to see the type of aid they're getting at that school and what they're going to end up either having to borrow or pay out of pocket at that institution, so that they can look at their award notifications from one school to the next and compare them based on what they're actually going to end up either borrowing or having to pay out of pocket, because the cost of schools vary greatly and financial aid packages can vary greatly.
Absolutely. And I know that's an important factor when making the decision. So the more information they have, the better. Dr. Mansell, I have another question that I know is going to address some of these. As families are filling out the application, if they run into a glitch signing in, they don't see the applications they're supposed to in their dashboard, where can I go for technical or just questions in general about their FAFSA form?
Studentaid.gov has a few resources available to students. There is a frequently asked questions section, as well as a live chat, as well as students and families can contact federal student aid directly. Anything to do with the processing of the FAFSA, you're going to go back to the Federal Department of Education. They can reach them at 1-800-4FED-AID.
Great. We will share that and track it down. But good to know that, I love that you were able to share this step by step. When you look at it that way, it's not as overwhelming and you
Hopefully
have
it
help.
isn't.
Yeah, we really, really appreciate it again, and the fact that students are going to have the FAFSA help at the institutions, and your step-by-step guide. I learn something new every time we do these sessions. So we really appreciate it. I think those are all the questions we have for tonight. I wanted to remind our audience that this recording is going to be available at the end of the sessions on floridashines.org. Once you're there, you can find College 101, and that'll take you directly to the recordings for tonight. And we also have some FAFSA videos, how-to videos on Florida Shines that you can use if those are helpful to you. And once again, thank you, Dr. Mansell, for spending the evening with us talking about FAFSA. Probably
My
something
pleasure.
probably something you talk about every day. I know it's a big topic for our family, so we are very thankful for your time today. And with that, we hope you have a wonderful night, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.